Hey guys, Kristy Rice here, and I'm excited to bring you a brand new demo video. This is full length at regular speed for the majority of the video. So let me show you the inspiration image I'm using here. It's got some great blooms that are in perfect relationship to one another, varying sizes, varying varieties of shapes. I just love this image. My favorite way to find inspiration images is by going on Instagram. One of my absolute favorites is Floret Flower. I will put that link in the description below. These are some brushes I'm using. Of course, my favorite dagger, that's the 1/8 inch dagger. These are, I forget exactly what they're called, silver. I've heard them called black velvet. I will put the links in description because so many people call them so many different things. So I want you to see where you can get them. Clean water and a paper towel. You can't do anything without your clean water and a paper towel. And I am using a cold press Arches watercolor block. I will put a link for that. It is the best paper in my humble opinion. It's definitely worth grabbing a couple sheets and giving it a try. So we're going to get started here, and I am going to speed things up just a smidge so that this doesn't go on forever and ever and ever. But I am going to be referring to my inspiration image all the way through as I'm painting. There won't be a time where I'm making up too much. I'm also going to be mixing colors moderately. So you will see me mixing. Here we go. I'm going to speed this up, but I'm not going to be crazy mixing. So don't worry too much about color theory or exactly how I'm mixing my colors. I'm just, doing very, very little of that. I'm going to start out here with just the brush, a little tiny bit of pigment and a lot of water. This paper can handle it. It's got a beautiful texture. I'm using this number 6 brush, and it's a wonderful brush. It holds a ton of water. You can use the broad side, you can use the point, and get just a ton of different strokes out of it. See how I kind of sketch with my brush first, knowing that that paper is going to take a little while to dry, and that I can then add water to the outline that I sketched in quickly and blend it together. So definitely think of your brush as a sketching tool, not just a painting tool. That way you can consider abandoning the pencil to draw things out first. And see there, I'm just making little semi-half circles around a center, and that's going to be a little rose there. Now I'm making short little brush strokes there to create this zinnia in my inspiration photo. And I'm using the point of the brush and pressing down pretty heavily to get those different strokes. A great practice technique that you can do is just see how many of those kinds of strokes you can make and fill a sheet, 8.5 by 11 sheet perhaps, and just really explore the brush. I recommend that exercise to everyone starting out with either a new brush or just starting out with watercolor in general. It's a great exercise. I'm going to continue on here with a little bud. In the beginning, when I first lay down color, I tend to lay down light color for roses and ranunculus, things like that. But right now I'm going to create another Cosmo, and you'll notice I laid down pretty intense color because I have a pretty good idea of my brush and the kind of marks that it makes. Bring back this inspiration image here so you can see that what I've been working on. So again, keep your inspiration image handy, refer to it often. Guys, I am not a realistic painter, not by any means. I'm somewhere of a cross between, I don't know, an impressionistic painter. I'm very expressive. I love bold color and I love detail. So I'm not a traditional painter in terms of my technique. I use a much more expressive technique. I tend to break a lot of the classical watercolor painting rules. For example, I don't always start light and work up to my darks. I often start dark and pull out my lights with clean water. So, this is my approach and this is how I do things. So I'm just hoping to share kind of this joy-filled approach to watercolor with you. And make sure that you're having a really, really good time while you're exploring watercolor and not stressing out too much. So here I'm just adding another little zinnia in. I'm trying to keep myself from going too dark on that one because I want it to be kind of a soft pink. Adding in another ranunculus here, and I'm just creating small strokes in a circular fashion around the perimeter of that shape. I do love to add a flower center in very early in my painting process because it gives me a visual context of what I'm painting. If I'm painting a flower and I'm just focusing on the petals and I'm just feeling a little lost, honestly, often with a flower where I don't put that center in. The center visually grounds me. It inspires me to keep moving. It gives me that context like, oh my gosh, this really is going to start to look like a flower instead of just working through with just the petals. So I really encourage you to give yourself those little visual motivators that you need. And that may just mean ignoring watercolor rules, quote unquote, because I want you to paint in a way that keeps you painting, that keeps you happy, that keeps you interested in what you're working on and doesn't get you flustered or frustrated. So rules be damned. Sorry guys, but rules be damned sometimes. Joy prevails and joy is more important. Oh goodness gracious. Anyway, so yeah, if putting that flower center in, or right now I'm popping in those two really bright areas that are buds, then by all means do it. If it makes you feel good about what you're doing, do it. Right now, I feel like I want more contrast. I want to see that rose start to come to life. Guys, I will tell you a secret. I struggle with roses. Oh my goodness gracious, do I struggle. So every time I start a painting that has a rose in it, I'm always so drawn to it. And see, even now, I abandoned that rose I was working on to start this big peony bud because I was feeling very self-conscious about that rose. But you know what? That I know is something I struggle with, just like I'm sure you have specific floral elements or, landscape or whatever it is that you're painting that you love. I guarantee there's still something in that genre that just scares the living daylights out of you, that you struggle with, that you seem to never be able to get right. But you know what? Don't avoid those things. Keep painting them. Keep pushing yourself because it's worth it. You'll have an aha moment. You'll discover what worked. You'll remember it and you'll be able to use it moving forward. So don't forget to keep looking at your inspiration image, guys. It's really important. I am going to give you a link to my inspiration image. So if you do want to paint along with me, you certainly can. I will often here, like I'm doing, I will start with a flower center. I will actually start the flower with the center. Again, it's just something that makes me feel more grounded, and I love starting that way. So figure out what makes you happy in painting. What makes you happy? Is it laying down bright color? Is it seeing that flower and its convincing shape emerge quite quickly in the process? Is it seeing a lot of detail? Whatever it is that makes you happy, don't necessarily feel like you have to delay laying down those details or working on that rose more than any other part of the painting, just because the rules tell you, oh, you should start light to dark, you shouldn't do details till right at the end, or the rules may tell you you should work all the way around a painting, keep your hand moving, and don't work up any one area over another. The rules might tell you things, but let me tell you what, guys, you don't have to follow them. I say this one thing all the time to my students. I say, I spent my high school years figuring out what I like to paint and how I like to paint. Then I spent my college years being told that everything I had figured out in high school was wrong and that I needed to paint this way. And then I spent my early adulthood figuring out how to break all of those rules that I had learned for the last 18 years. So I learned really, really the hard and long way that painting is not worth painting. I don't care if it's for a business. I don't care if you make a lot of money from it, but it's not worth painting if you're not having fun. It's just not. And I know we could get into a philosophical debate about that, and I will meet you there anytime, anywhere, because it's not worth it. I've been there. I've painted just for profit. I've painted to make my clients happy, because you know we do stationery. I've painted in a way that makes me miserable, and you know what? It comes out in the painting. It does. So if you're painting a way that someone else has told you to paint, if you've attended a workshop and you've been told that your way is wrong and to stop it, but that way that they told you to stop makes you happy, then by all means ignore that person. Don't listen to them. Keep painting the way that makes you feel good, because there's a reason there. That is that part of your painting and that experience that seriously makes you feel good and gives you that little chill and that little feeling of exhilaration and that little, oh my gosh, I really like this. That feeling, that moment, that's important. And that's where your wow factor is. And that's where, if you want to make money from your art, that's where you need to go to, that place, that happy place, because that's where you're going to be successful. Not following someone else's rules, not following old masters' rules. No. So trust me, I've been in business, guys, for 13 years, and I have figured out, I'm still learning, but I have figured out some things along the way so far that don't work. And let me tell you, painting purely for profit and putting aside your own joy and happiness in painting does not bring home more money. It just doesn't in the long run. So anyway, I will drop the proverbial mic on that one for now. I am sorry. I just get really passionate about that. And let's continue on here. Guys, you'll see I'm starting to already go back into some of the lighter areas and adding some detail. So the area for now, I'm in the pomegranate right now, and the base layer that I added has dried, and I'm going in. I had added some color. I'm also now going in and I'm pulling out some color. I tend to do that a lot. You've probably heard me talk about it if you've watched the majority of my paint along videos here on YouTube, is I do a lot of push and pull. I will lay down super intense color and then I will immediately pull some of it back up. You may be wondering, what do you mean push and pull? Well, very simply, it's a technique that I love. It's called lifting. Some people know it as scrubbing. Some people know it as a multitude of other things. But I call it lifting. And what that means is you lay down color with a wet, juicy, filled brush. And then you clean your brush. You go back into either a wet area. You can even go back into a dry area with a very wet brush. And you start lightly scrubbing the area, pulling the color out. Now, I will call to your attention here when I do some of that lifting. So I do a lot of that. I'll lay down color and I'll immediately say, oh, it's a little bit much. Or, gosh, I laid this color down yesterday and I really want to turn that area into a highlight. It's too dark. I will go in with clean water and I will lift it out. There was a little bit of lifting. There we go. There's the lifting, guys. See that? Clean, dry brush, boom, pulls that color out. Lifting can smooth out an area that feels too blotchy and too textural. Lifting can create instant highlights. Lifting can just simply remove an area that was a mistake. Just one thing I'll say with lifting, especially if you're not using a super high quality paper, is to not scrub too hard. Lifting is a process of patience. So slowly and surely, you won't disturb the surface of your paper. So here, guys, I've evolved this painting a little bit more. And you can see I've started adding more detail on the left, more leaves, more blooms, more buds, using the same techniques that I was using all along. Now I've started to add in background with a dirty color, I like to call it. You may have the dirty color already on your palette. It's what happens and collects in the corners naturally. It's a mixture of all different colors. If you don't have dirty color on your palette, mix together a blue, a really strong purple, or a alizarin crimson, and an orange, and you're gonna have a dirty color. And you can go in and start doing some really cool stuff in the background. Little bits, little areas, little things that you wanna carve out in your painting. The dirty color is a great way to do that right there. See, I wanted to make that flower pop a little more, so I put in a little bit of background with dirty color. I also tend to do leaves with dirty color. It's just a really pretty decorative accent for painting. So it, I call it dirty color just because it's made up of so many colors, but it's really kind of a really intense indigo purpley tone. And I love it because it instantly, see at that rose there? Look at that. Adding those leaves in kind of carved out further the shape of that rose. So I love that. Experiment with that. You can even just take a little 5x5 piece of watercolor paper, guys, and you could paint a little pattern in pinks and add some green leaves, let it dry, and then go in and practice adding in the dirty color background like I'm doing here. It's so much fun. So much fun. So give it a try for sure. I'm going back in here. I'm adding some buds. So just little green round. There's that lifting again and pulling out some of the color, pulling it out again. I always have my paper towel in my left hand, which is my non-dominant hand, so that I can have it exactly when I need it. So let's look at the inspiration image again. You can see I'm following it pretty closely, guys, but just putting my own kind of expressive spin on things. There we go. You can take a look at that. So what I'm going to show you now with the inspiration image in full view, I'm going to start working on some detail. I really want to get that pomegranate top to pop, because that little pomegranate darkness at the top is really what makes it distinctively a pomegranate. So I worked on that a little bit. I'm adding some highlights in here. A great color for highlights is Daniel Smith Buff. It's in the bottom left-hand corner of my palette that you can see there, and it's almost gone. Buff. I will again put that in the description below. It's a great highlight. It's a more opaque watercolor. So again, breaking the rules, because traditional pure watercolor techniques dictate that you should leave your whites, the white of the paper, and I tend to not subscribe to that. So I am using my 1/8 inch dagger, just the tip of it, and I am creating little lines in this zinnia here. Again, this is another great technique to practice. If you want to use a lot of little tiny lines in your work, this is just a style of mine. Some people don't get this detailed in their watercolors, especially these days. The very trendy watercolor look is very splishy, splashy, very wet, and there's not a lot of line quality going on, but that's just not me, guys. So I do a lot of line quality. So I mixed up a darker red. You could just mix red with a little bit of green, and you're going to get a darker red, or you can mix red with some alizarin crimson. So, just however you want to do it, like a cadmium red with alizarin crimson, or a little bit of sap green. Any kind of green that you have would be great. And look, I'm just adding in these scratchy little thin lines to create texture and to create the striations in the petal of the zinnia. And I'm going in immediately with a little bit more yellow, but again, I'm using very intense color, much less water on my brush, a lot more pigment, so that I can get those little marks going in there. All right, I want to define this ranunculus. It's bothering me. I want to define it more. So I'm kind of using my brush almost like a pencil, and that I'm drawing in definition lines. It's looking a little bit more like a rose right now, and I will tell you that is frustrating to me. And I just like to speak really honestly in these paint-alongs, guys, because these are the things that you're going to notice, and they're going to happen to you. You're going to be like, why does this look like a rose? It's not a rose, it's a ranunculus. But you know what? I want to speak truthfully about it, because it's still a really pretty bloom. It's still a fairly convincing bloom in this expressive style. So it's okay. It's super okay. So I'm just going to continue on here. I wanted you to see closer what is going on here. You can see that detail that I use. Ooh, I want to add a little darkness there. And see, that's really wet up there, guys. Super, super wet. So you just want to keep an eye on that and not let things get out of control. And by all means, when you see puddles like that, do not lift your paper at that point. I know that may seem obvious, but you'd be surprised. Anyway, I'm going into this little bud here, adding my kind of classic Kristy lines that I like to add in. That was a bit much for me, so I did blot it out a little bit. Feel free to do that. Just know when you blot with a paper towel, you're going to get a little texture left behind. So as long as you're okay with that, by all means do it. I tend to minimize how much blotting I do, because I really love the raw texture when the water and the pigment hits the paper. So I don't like to dampen that. More detail up here in this zinnia. Again, I'm using my brush almost like a pen or a pencil, and just really kind of skipping and gracing my brush across the page as I go. Okay, so let's see here. I'm going to continue with the detail work in the pomegranate. I want to add some cross-hatching. Cross-hatching are just a series of thin little lines that cross over one another. Just putting some lines in here that really give the pomegranate more definition and more of a shape. So I love that. And I just love adding definition. Now this color is a little bit of buff and a little bit of alizarin crimson to get kind of this dark, muddy peach color. And guys, like I mentioned, this is a much more moody painting. My colors are purposely a little more muddy in terms of, you know, they're not super vibrant all over the place. But that was kind of my plan. I'm adding in some more detail lines in the leaves. Keeping the detail lines pretty straight here because everything else in the painting is very organic and curved, and I just feel like I need a little bit more structure. Going in and adding some more detail throughout here. Now see, I started adding that green and I'm like, well, I can't even see it for goodness sake. So I need to go a different direction there with that one leaf. These are the conversations that you should be having with yourself as you paint. See, I needed to darken that color up a bit. Talk to yourself. If you lay down a color and you're instantly like, ooh, I don't know, I shouldn't have done that. Well, kind of talk to yourself and figure out why you shouldn't have done that, and go ahead and lift that color out of there. You know, you lay down a color in watercolor painting, and if you're using a good paper, guys, you have time. You have time to lift things out and remove color. You can barely see it. Sorry, guys, I'm off the page here, but I am adding, this is another Kristy signature. I am adding a little bit of unexpected orange into my leaves. I will do this. I don't know why. I don't know where it started, but I will create the veins in the leaves sometimes in a really cool, unexpected color. An orange or an opera rose or whatever the case may be, but just something super unexpected. And you'll notice I went ahead and added a little bit of that opera rose into the background as well. So remember, when your watercolor dries, you can then layer over top of it again and have fun that way. That's called glazing. It's a really fun technique. And here's some more cross-hatching. This is with pure buff. Very little water, a lot of pigment, just enough water on the brush so that the paint moves smoothly. And there, boom, look at those highlights. Oh my gosh, that's it. That's it. I'm going to try to leave it alone. I hope I have the discipline to leave it alone. Guys, I know I've been talking throughout this whole piece here pretty quickly, and I have been mentioning a lot of techniques. So I really encourage you to rewatch this a few times. And I know it's long. Please forgive me. I know this is a long one, but there's a lot of information jam-packed in here, obviously about the emotional side of painting, but also about the technique side. So I want to mention here what I'm doing. I felt like this particular bud was getting super muddy and I was getting frustrated with myself. So what fix a muddy bud? Opera rose. I love opera rose. Sorry guys, I got a little excited there. I absolutely adore opera rose. You know it if you've watched any of my videos here on YouTube. So nothing will jazz up a dull part of your painting like a little bit of opera rose. And I'm not kidding you, even glaze opera rose over top of a muddy green or a muddy brown or a muddy red, and boom, it just brightens and livens it up. Trust me, it's amazing. Going down into the ranunculus here, I am having a little bit of a love affair with this bloom. It's been one of my favorite elements since I started the painting, so I'm really nervous. I don't want to screw it up, but I'm just going in light-handed. I'm thinking about what I'm doing as I'm going. I'm making sure I don't press down too hard, unless I want, like here, I wanted a little bit more of a thickness to the outer petals. So anyway, I know, let's speak to that a little bit. You can paint and work on a painting and you're like, nah, about it, and you're okay with it. But there's this one part that you love so much and you're just so nervous about messing it up. If you feel that way, let me give you this bit of advice. Let that area go. work on other areas and try not to stress about it. Take a breath before you start painting that favorite area that you're worried about messing up, and just let it go. Breathe in, big breath in, let it go, and start painting. I always say it's only paper, it's only paint, and you can try this again. So working on this rose here, guys, this could also come across as a peony easily, or a cabbage rose. So I'm just adding some line work in here. Again, I'm really stylizing the look and the angle of these petals, just because this whole piece is pretty expressive and stylized. So I'm just going with the flow. Again, to prevent things from getting too dingy, I'm putting in a little opera rose, flooding in a little bit of opera rose. There I did the lift again. See, it's pretty subtle, but that lifting happens all the time in my paintings, all the time. Now I am going to add opera rose. I'm using it again like a pen or a pencil, sketching in those lines to define that rose shape even further. And guys, did I tell you, I get so frustrated with roses. You look at them and you're enchanted by them and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to paint them. And then you start and you're like, goodness gracious, these are tough. And there are a lot of folks out there and they're creating beautiful pieces. Please don't get me wrong or take this the wrong way. But there is a lot of formulaic ways to paint roses these days. I am not a formula painter in terms of stylizing my stuff to the point that it just always looks the same over and over again, just different arrangements, different colors. So I tend to really look at what I'm painting and try to recreate it. But what happens is that I struggle because Mother Nature creates everything beautifully and different, and there we are left to figure it out visually and get it from our eyes to the page. So it's okay to struggle. I just recommend don't fall into a formulaic way of painting. You're not, in the end, I just don't feel you're going to get powerful, true joy out of formulaic painting. It's kind of like the one-stroke painting of the 90s. Go ahead, Google it. Ooh. Anyway, so I'm just working through here, more and more detail, trying to ignore the fact that I'm frustrated with my rose painting skills. And again, guys, I'm just being super honest. You know, I paint professionally. I get paid to paint. I run a business. It's all based on fine art, but I still get super frustrated almost every time I sit down to paint, guys. So you're not alone in this. It can be a scary thing, but it doesn't have to be. And I pray for you that it isn't on a daily basis. I want you to sit down. I want you to paint with joy and just have so much fun with this. Anyway, getting back on my soapbox, guys. So going into the leaves here, nothing makes me feel better about a painting towards the end where I can add in these super strong details and feel really good about the lines that I'm creating. Again, those leaves, those little techniques that I'm doing there, a great practice element. Paint yourself a bunch of leaves, let them dry, come back and try to add in those veins in a really graceful and convincing way. Great exercise, guys. All right, so we are coming near the end. We're just going to paint for a little bit longer, and then we will be on our way, guys. And I really hope you've enjoyed this. So let's see here. I want to add in more detail. This is another flower, guys, that I've really loved, and I don't want to mess it up. I'm adding in some texture lines here. Little bits. I've mixed together a little bit of buff, again, that Daniel Smith buff that I've talked about, and a little bit of alizarin crimson and a little bit of a French ultramarine to create that beautiful lavender color. Going back in with really strong yellow to define the center of these flowers for you to take a look at. Okay, so I want to add a little bit more definition to the leaves up here. I'm going to go ahead with my signature unexpected color. There, we need to get a little darker, a little bit of yellow. It's just so pretty. The light is catching it here pretty strongly, but it's much more intense in person. This is just something fun that I tend to do often in my paintings, so don't feel like you have to copy this look. By all means, try it out if you like. It's really fun, and a little bit, it's definitely freeing. And I felt like, you know, this is something I do too. I felt like we need a little definition here, fill up the space a little bit. So I'm adding some leaves in that bright yellow over top of that muddy color background that I had put in before. So just let's step back. Now, I've only been working up the detail on the right-hand side for now, just for demo purposes, but I want to give you a full view here so you can see where we're at. And just for fun, I want to add in a couple more line quality moments here, defining this rose. And guys, you will notice this rose is so not realistic. The center of the rose swirls up and gets really tall. It's silly, really, but like I said, I struggle with roses. So I am who I am. What can I say? I'm going to just keep on practicing. This big peony bud, this thing is huge. This floral arrangement I actually had in person for an editorial that I was working on. And guys, let me tell you, that peony bud was just that big. Insane. Adding some bright orange leaf details here, guys. Super bold, super bold. I just feel like with all these bold reds that are popping out amidst the greens and the pinks here, that little touch of orange is just super needed and really livens things up. A little broad stroke there of red. So this is a great time in your painting when you are, I mean, let's face it, I'm about halfway done. I'm not going to finish the whole thing here in this demo, but it's a great time to step back, take a look at what you've been working on, really just examine areas that you feel like are popping out too much. Maybe there's an area that your eye goes right to and you just feel like it's too darn dark and you want to fix it. For example, right now, as I'm painting and looking around what I've been working on, that area right in the top middle where I painted in the dirty color background, it just, my eye keeps going to that. And, you know, eventually I'm going to have to do something about that. Maybe add in a really strong little cluster of leaves to break up that area. But right now my eye is just drawn there and I know that that is not a super successful area. And those are just the type of things that you want to look for. You want to keep your eye open. You want to be able to critique yourself. That's how you learn. That's how you move forward in your painting experience. Guys, look at this ridiculous rose. Like, seriously, I actually really dig this painting, except that rose just makes me laugh. It's like super tall rose. It's crazy. Anyway, you have to be able to make fun of yourself too. I'm adding a little bit more dirty color background here. Just because it's going to give definition. It's going to make me feel good. It's going to make that rose look better than it is. So just adding that in as I go here. Okay. So a little bit, see, I'm cutting into that peony bud really nicely. Beautiful. Okay, I'm working over here. So when you're adding in that muddy background, remember, you're not only just adding in blocks of color, you're cutting into lighter areas surrounding where you're laying down those big blocks of intense color. See, I'm cutting into that rose, and for some reason, I feel compelled to make it even taller and more obvious that it is so unrealistic. Whatever, it's my goofy rose. So remember, you're working almost in like a negative space kind of concept. So you're cutting into areas, you're being able to define areas more when you're putting in those really dark backgrounds and dark accents around lighter areas. Okay, so just keep moving around this painting. Now look, I'm going back in with pretty sheer color, pretty light color, totally breaking the rules, guys. If I were following the classic rules, this whole painting would still be very soft. I'd be gradually building up colors with very fine layers. Glazing is the technique specifically. But you know what? No, that's not how I work. So I'm going right back in with super sheer color, light color, adding in more details that I feel like the painting needs. And guys, this is quite the work in progress, but I thought it was just a great one to show you live. because I am literally thinking out loud. I'm not only letting you know kind of my opinions on painting and my philosophical ideas, but I'm letting you know more about my thought process. I have so enjoyed this YouTube community, guys. And I love your comments. I adore your comments, and I reply to every single one. And at least I try to. And if I've missed you, if there's a comment, guys, comment again if I haven't gotten back to you, and push it up to the top, because let me tell you, my goal, and I'm really pretty sure I have replied to every single comment. So if you've not gotten a reply, that is absolutely by mistake. So please keep the comments coming. I want to hear what you'd like to see me demo in the future, what things maybe you don't agree with me on, and that's okay. Maybe somebody can tell me how to paint a daggone rose, because I would love to be able to paint a rose more convincingly. Anyway, I am being super myself tonight. I hope you guys don't mind it. I've had so much fun painting this for you. And I would love to connect further. Just adding in some fun outline details here. That is another little thing that I tend to do to lighten things up and make things that are getting a little intense and dark airy. So I add in these little outline bits that I won't necessarily fill in. I'll just leave them kind of outline and just really fun. Okay, so guys, I'm going to be signing off here. So much fun. Please keep the comments coming. I want to hear from you. I would love to even just, see the stuff you're working on. If there is a portfolio site that you have, or an Instagram page that you run and you put your work on, please let me know what it is in the comment section so I can see what you're working on, and hopefully we can connect again soon. Thank you so much, guys.